Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the CPE webinar, Gearing Up for Fiscal Year End. My name is Sam Lester of the Office of University Controller. I am pleased to be here today with subject matter expert Leela McCamey from the Boulder Controller's Office. Leela, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's fiscal year end and I'm excited.
Well, we are glad to have you. Real quick, a couple of administrative things. We do have handouts that should have been provided to all the audience members. There is a Q&A feature in the Zoom program that we're using. Down towards the bottom of your screen, feel free to throw out questions and we will try to answer them through the course of this webinar. Anything that we are unable to address, we will collect and provide to Leela so she can give us answers. The Q&A, the recording, the handout, and the evaluation for the course will all be provided to you in a link by the end of the week. There are going to be poll questions throughout the course of this to keep you engaged. Just a note to any CPAs in the audience: in order to get your CPE credit, you must answer all the poll questions and attend the webinar in its entirety. And if we can, let's go ahead and start a poll question so you can get an idea for how those work. All right, Leela, so how many fiscal year ends have you participated in? One or two? Just a few? Have you stopped counting at this point? Or, I don't think this applies to you, but what is fiscal year end?
Yeah, that last one doesn't so much apply to me, but I think by answering that question, I'd be giving away my age.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So put me in the I stopped counting category.
Understood. I guess I'm on a few. Let's give a couple more seconds here for audience members to provide their answers. We can end polling and show everybody what the majority of people think. All right, let's share the results here. Looks like most people have stopped counting, so we have a number of pros in the audience is what it looks like.
Well, good. That means that we can get through some of these slides really fast.
Sounds good. We'll rifle right through them, and on that, let's get started here.
Okay. So today we're going to go through fiscal year end. And at the end of this course, you'll be able to explain why June 30th is so important, the types of tasks that are most often performed at fiscal year end, who does what essentially, and then a lot of the resources that are available for you during the fiscal year end process. I suppose the main course objective is really to make fiscal year end less of a maze and more like, well, a very calming meme instead.
Sounds good.
So there is a lot that happens at fiscal year end, and why is that? So June 30th is CU's fiscal year end, and it marks the end of our annual accounting period. And we have generally 12 main periods throughout the year, but when we're talking this accounting period in terms of fiscal year end and getting things recorded in the correct time frame, we're really talking the full fiscal year. And so that's July 1st through June 30th. We're required actually by US GAAP to issue financial statements annually, which also then allows us to annually evaluate our operations. But we use this June 30th fiscal year end for good reason. There are a lot of other fiscal year ends. A lot of businesses will use a calendar year or maybe something off of the calendar year. Say if Christmas is their big, like at retail, Christmas is a big push for the retail businesses. Their fiscal year end may not end December 30th because it doesn't make sense for their business. The federal government, on the other hand, their fiscal year end is September 30th. So we've got that to look forward to coming up here in 3 months. For us, we are an entity under the Colorado Constitution, and we roll up our financial statements into the state's financial statements. And therefore, we also use the state financial fiscal year end of June 30th. And really, if you think about it, the academic year, the fiscal year, with summer being a less busy time of year in general, especially from the academic side of things, June 30th just tends to work really well for us from a timing perspective. When all of the academic rush is done, then we can take time to really look at the fiscal side of things and make sure that that's all tied up in a nice little bow. All of the data and whatnot, everything that goes together to support and to create the annual report is used. It's used to compare us with our peer institutions so we can get a feel for how healthy we are financially compared to peer institutions. All of that data is used to help us make decisions. And then all of it is also, the annual report itself is subject to external audit. So it's really critical that we take this point in time, make sure the information is accurate so that we can put our best picture forward. Because we'll find out that everything that we're doing here is just really to create a picture of what we do throughout the year. Now this slide here, I realize this is probably very difficult for most of you to read. I hope everyone has the handout on here. And as Sam mentioned, if you don't already have the handout, we'll be able to provide this by the end of the week. This serves to illustrate the main types of tasks that occur at fiscal year end. It's not comprehensive, but as you can see, there's a big role that departments play. There's a big role that the campus central offices play, and then there's a big role that the system office, particularly the OUC, but not specifically, not only the OUC, that they play. And you can also see who's busy when. So for departments, a lot of your business happens leading up to fiscal year end, and by the time we hit July, you're really at the point of tying up the last loose ends. Whereas at that point, then the campus tasks really kick in and the system tasks kick in as well. The other thing you can see from this is that fiscal year end doesn't only occur on June 30th. It would be wonderful if it was only 24 hours long. But fiscal year end really starts as early as March and even goes all the way through the year, sometimes even into January or February, depending when the Legislative Audit Committee meets to review our final report. So I don't know, when somebody joked to me once, there's about 2 weeks during the year where we're not preparing for fiscal year end. I think he was right.
Sounds accurate.
So the next slide we have here, this is the OUC, the Office of University Controller's website, and every year they create a dedicated page for the fiscal year end tasks and resources, the calendar. I mean, this page here, the calendar that's linked at the bottom is comprehensive. And if you were to download that calendar, take a look at it, it really will give you a flavor. Well, it'll give you more than a flavor. It'll give you a full meal about what is it that we do at fiscal year end and who does what. So fiscal year end, in order to be successful, has to be a coordinated effort. The OUC leads the coordination, and it includes them, obviously. It includes also university information systems, employee services, the procurement service center, your campus controller's office or finance offices, the bursar's office for cash management, the campus controller's office, and then every single department on campus. Everybody has a part to play at fiscal year end. And so we're just trying to kind of get all of these various offices together, coordinated, so that we all land at the end at the same time with accurate financial statements.
I feel like I always have this Excel calendar open for this entire season.
I do too. I have that calendar, and then we also have a campus calendar as well that's on our campus controller's website. And the two of those in conjunction, I feel like I know what I'm doing if I've got those open, and check that every single morning.
I hear you.
So for fiscal year end, the dates that we really drive to are here on this slide. And in particular, first close and second close if you're at a department, and then third close and final close for the campus and the OUC. So for several years now, we have had campus close on a Thursday and system close on a Friday. Now July 4th is on a Thursday this year, so it kind of got in the middle because, well, it would be rude if we required people to come in and work on July 4th. That might be a federal offense or something, I don't know. So we have we have campus close. Our first close is July 3rd this year, and then the next business day, July 5th. And this is a little bit like a regular month-end close. And this close is for period 12, which is kind of June proper. After we close period 12, then we enter into period 996, and period 996, which is second close then, is on July 11th with system close on July 12th. If you're in a department, block off this week on your calendar, because this is one of the weeks that you'll be very, very busy potentially. And we'll talk about why as we go through this. If you are in the at a campus central office or with the system office, third close is a big deal for you. And that's going to happen on July 18th with the system close on the 19th. And then I put here final close, which is period 998, more as informational. For departments, there's no expectation that you're actually doing journal entries into period 998, but it's important to know that after we close June, period 997, July is open. You can go make July entries through this time. But if you're reviewing your reports and you find an error that does belong in June or within, FY19 in this case, we do have this extra period that is available to make corrections. And so I would encourage you to continue looking at your June statements, make sure everything is correct, and if you find an error, contact your campus controller's office. We do keep what's known as the known errors file. And we update the OUC with that known errors file, and we make a determination together to say, this is material, we need to accrue it, in which case the campus controller's office will work with the department to make sure we're accruing it to the right place, or we will choose to not accrue it, and that choice will be documented. And that way when the auditors come, because, external audit, when they come and ask questions, then we can say, yes, we knew about this and this is what we chose to do with it. And that just puts us in a better place as a system throughout fiscal year end. So as we are talking about who does what during fiscal year end, let's start with departments. And the first critical task is not really a year-end task. It is just a year-round, everybody should be doing this every month. I know, that's a little bit much to expect sometimes because there are a lot of speed types here. But the task itself is reconciling the speed types. And even if you're reconciling your speed types throughout the year, which I highly recommend, I do recognize that there's a lot to do during the year that is not reconciliation. We all have other parts to our job that take precedence every once in a while. And so some stuff does get pushed to the back burner. Fiscal year end is the time to take those reconciliation items, bring them to the front of the stove, and deal with them. In particular, I want to talk about two particular account codes that really throughout the year might get just totally glossed over. The first one is this company card personal charges, and this is account code 013109, sits on the balance sheet. I know a lot of people don't necessarily look at their balance sheet every month. This is the time to start doing that. And then the other account code, company card unallowable expense, which is 553201, is one of our expense accounts. Now, I can just hear, I can hear Bob saying, but wait a minute, isn't a personal expense an unallowable expense? Yes, yes it is. And yet we have two different account codes. So let's talk about the difference between those account codes just real quick, because they do cause some confusion potentially. Now, let's start with unallowable expenses, account 553201. Anything that hits our income statement, so a revenue or an expense, the assumption or the implication behind that is that that charge, and we'll just talk expenses for the moment, that expense is a legitimate expense. It's for CU business. If it's not for CU business, it shouldn't be hitting an expense account. It should be an accounts receivable because somebody owes us money. Personal charges, for example. And so the difference between these really is in how we use our company card. If I use my card for a personal charge, there's the expectation that I reimburse it. However, and I speak from experience, unfortunately, on this one, it's a very clear object lesson for me. If I check into a hotel at 3 a.m. because I got delayed on a flight because my flight with that first flight was actually canceled and so was the second. So I'm kind of tired, it's 3 a.m. checking into the hotel, I give them a company card. A couple weeks later, I'm back in my office because once I got back from the conference, I'm doing my expense report and I realize, gosh darn, how do I allocate this hotel charge? Oh, I put it on my P card. Whoops. The procurement card is still official business, that's good. The hotel charge was still official business. I was attending a conference in my official capacity as the CU employee. So it's a legitimate expense, but I shouldn't have used my procurement card. So it's really an unallowable method of procurement, not so much an unallowable expense. Hopefully that makes some sense. And so really I would take that, that charge, allocate it to unallowable expenses, 553201. That expense report gets pushed through, it gets approved, and then I follow it with a journal entry to move it to the appropriate travel account code. So hopefully that makes sense for people. Whereas personal charges, really, they're sheerly personal, and there's expectation of reimbursement because I should not have used that card for that purchase. It was purely personal. So it's the difference between those two. And in a lot of cases, these particular account codes get overlooked during the reconciliation process. So for fiscal year end, your goal with account 553201 is to make it 0. Allocate those charges to the right account code, the right speed type. Personal charges, the 013109, should have a reimbursement associated with it. And if there isn't, then we need to get that reimbursement in, and maybe that reimbursement comes in the next fiscal year. It's a balance sheet account, so it will be there in the next fiscal year. Okay. So I've gotten enough information about that, you think?
I think those are both really valid examples, and multiple times daily do we get those questions at the help desk. So,
okay. The other items to pay particular attention to while you're doing your reconciliation are your suspense or your clearing accounts. So 553201 is one of those, but you may also have, say, a payroll account or some other suspense account or clearing account in your department. You want to make sure to clear those out. And then also any corrections, errors, reclassifications, that kind of thing that came up during other reconciliations throughout the year. You want to make sure that you take care of those. So now, this is where we have a lot of people who are no longer even counting their fiscal year ends. They're pretty savvy with the fiscal year end process. So I'm going to make an assumption that they're pretty savvy with reconciliations at this point as well. For those of you who are newer, you might want to take a screenshot here because there is a lot of information on this particular page so that when you do go do your reconciliations, you've got a good idea of the goals of it. I mean, really, we want to make sure that we do these reconciliations because we want to ensure that the transactions are properly recorded and that there's nothing funky going on or any fiscal misconduct. And by doing the reconciliations, especially throughout the year, you can make sure that there are fewer tasks on your plate come fiscal year end because the speed types that you're reconciling are simply cleaner and more accurate. And reconciliations, really, I see these as kind of the bedrock of our fiscal processes. Because if I'm talking with somebody in one of our departments and I know that they've reconciled their speed types, they know exactly what's sitting there and why, excuse me, that gives me confidence in the accuracy of those speed types. And then that can give me more confidence in the accuracy of our campus speed types, which then gets translated to confidence on the accuracy at the system level when we consolidate all of our financials into our report at the end of the year. And I see this as foundational because CU is a big and largely decentralized institution. In FY18, we had $3.5 billion in revenues that we reported. That's a good amount. And the state reports $35 billion in revenues. We're 10% of what the state reports in revenues in FY18. That's a lot of money. Yeah. It's a lot of responsibility, and it's a lot of, we're seen.
High visibility.
High visibility, exactly. And so making sure that we're confident with the financials that we have is key. And so reconciliations are a big piece of that. Let's take an example with the company card personal charges and something you might have found during a reconciliation process. So here we have a scenario. So there was a personal card charge made at King Soopers for $52.45 using the procurement card It was personal. So it was assigned to company card personal charges, account code 013109 in speed type 110-12345. So Sam, what is it that someone should do in this scenario?
Cash receipt.
Yep.
Deposit at the bursar's office and attach it to the report showing that they paid it back.
Exactly. And so that's what we did in this case. We did a cash receipt. We deposited it to 013109, and we used speed type 110-98765.
Oh.
Oh. Why do you say oh?
Well, that actually brings us to another poll question, if we can go ahead and get that going here.
Let's do that.
How do we resolve this scenario? Account code 013109 nets to 0, so no issue. The charge is unallowable, so do a journal entry to account code 553201 for unallowable. Or JE the reimbursement to speed type 110-12345, account code 013109. Let's let them roll in here. We're not going to give any hints as to who's giving what answer, but we do have a lot of good audience participation. So I'm not going to ask you either, because that'll give it away.
It would, wouldn't it?
The nature of this poll question is such that we have to keep it private till the end, I guess. So looks like we've got a good amount of participation. We'll give it another couple seconds here.
And don't forget, if you're a CPA and you want that CPE, you need to respond to the poll questions.
Yep. All right, let's go ahead and end the poll here and share the results. Looks like we have an overwhelming response for JE the reimbursement to account code 013109 on the correct speed type.
I think that is the best answer.
That sounds accurate.
Yep. So as you can see from our next slide, this is what it would look like then on the financials, on the financial detail after we've done the reimbursement. I'm sorry, after we've done the journal entry to move that reimbursement. So you can see from the top box that kind of non-shaded $52.45. That was our original procurement card charge. At the bottom, that box, the red shaded cell, this is our reimbursement. Now, yeah, 013109 does net to 0. And from a certain perspective, I could see that that's okay. But it's messy, and we want to tidy this up. We're going to take the Marie Kondo approach and tidy it up. And so the journal entry, the effect of the journal entry is on the green cells there. And so we zero out 013109 on both speed types, because truly we don't know how these speed types are related. They may not even be in the same org, and it's just less messy when everything goes to 0 like this. So that was something that you might have seen on a reconciliation with a P-card charge associated with it. Staying with the concur type of theme here, at fiscal year end, there are some tasks that departments need to do associated with concur. And we have a couple of deadlines here for June 20th and June 21st. Those are kind of a big deal. And these are specifically for FY19. Now, every fiscal year, we have these kind of similar deadlines at a similar time frame. So this is something that is just repeatable year after year. Now, what these deadlines refer to is that we want as much posted into the financials as possible. On June 20th, this is your deadline for employee travel card, travel expense, travel card, employee and non-employee expense reimbursements. 3 things there on June 20th. That is the where you need to have that expense report fully approved. Well, I think it actually needs campus approval, because the PSC does their own travel approval following that. And so that's why you have June 20th as the deadline itself. June 21st is that same deadline for procurement cards, and that's to have an expense report submitted and approved, so with campus approval, by that close of business on June 21st. Now, following those dates gives us this window of time for procurement card transactions only, where you can continue to assign those to expense reports, submit them, and get them approved to ensure posting in FY19, but it will hit for an accrual as opposed to the more regular kind of transaction. And so between June 21st and July 3rd, that's the time frame for those procurement card transactions. Now, I do want to make a quick note, travel card, those transactions are not accrued. And so if you think about travel, oftentimes we book travel well in advance of the actual travel itself. So if you were to think about a conference, a registration fee, for example, maybe I last week called up and I registered for a conference, but that conference isn't actually going to occur until September. But I paid for the conference on my procurement card, right? And so it's going to actually hit procurement card. It will be accrued. And so I need to make sure I know that, because maybe I don't want it accrued. And we'll talk a lot about the manual accruals in the next hour. But if I actually put that conference registration on my travel card, it would not be picked up for accrual, which is perfect because that conference has not yet occurred. And so I don't want the expense itself hitting our financials necessarily until next year. And so travel card's a great way to do that because it will not be accrued. But it also speaks to the fact that if I'm looking at a travel card charge, I don't know when that travel occurred. I don't know if it belongs in this year, if it belongs in next year. Really only the card holder and the delegate perhaps know that information. And so that's kind of a logic why we do not accrue travel card expenses. Now, if you are the administrator in your department and you're responsible for making sure that all of these transactions are appropriately assigned into the correct fiscal year, the PSC has created a couple different reports, 3 different reports specifically to help you manage those transactions. This is another slide where you might want to take a screenshot because this bottom bullet here has the 5 pieces of information that you need to send in order to request these reports. So you'll send the email address of the person who is to receive the report, the name of the report, so either unposted procurement card aging, unposted travel card aging, or unposted cash advance. You can do any or all 3 of those. It's up to you. In that email, you'll also include the org number or numbers that you want the report for, whether you want it monthly or weekly, and the date of the month or the day of the week to receive it. So it might be you want it on the 5th of the month or on Tuesday. Just let them know and send that email to procurementcard@cu.edu and they'll get you set up with that. And that is, I received those reports for myself. Very, very helpful at knowing what's sitting in Concur that needs to end up in this fiscal year. So next we have a CU Marketplace. So there are some critical tasks to do here. And these are mainly around the PO, SPO invoices, payment vouchers, and POs and SPOs, also the paper forms. So in order to ensure payment in FY19, last Friday was actually the deadline for the paper forms and the PO, SPO invoices, as well as campus approval for payment vouchers. Now, paper forms will not be accrued. So if you have a paper form, you're sending it in anytime now through the end of the year, and it's a significant amount that makes a difference to your department, you may choose to accrue that. The PSC will not do it for you. PO, SPO invoices and payment vouchers will be accrued, and so continue sending those into the PSC. They will continue to be processed, and they will then be accrued if, for whatever reason, they can't actually get into this current fiscal year. So the PSC will keep processing these documents. They just may not be guaranteed for payment and posting for the fiscal year. Those items, though, will be accrued. On the PO and SPO roll forwards, POs will not roll forward if they're 0. So if you do not want, I'm sorry, what am I trying to, let me try that again. POs, if they're 0, they won't roll forward. If you want them to roll forward, they need to have, you need to close them. I got that backwards, didn't I?
Well, I know that they go in and periodically and definitely at fiscal year ends close fully invoiced and fully matched purchase orders. So regarding those SPOs, they need to have $1. I think you're going into that. I don't want to jump ahead, but
no, keep going.
make sure that they have $1 of encumbrance at least, so that they are included in the roll forward, and change order at cu.edu can help you with that. Since I stole it for a second, if we can jump to a quick question from Joe Hemphill.
Yeah, go for it.
If we use the P card between 6/22 and 7/3/19, will the system auto accrue the transaction? We can kind of work on that one without the calendar right in front of us.
Right, that's a great question, Joe. So the accrual logic for the P card is anything that has a transaction date of June 30th or prior. So a 7/3 transaction won't accrue, but a 6/30 transaction will. And so it's rather tough, and we get into this in a lot more detail in the next hour. But just in case folks can't join us for that, do know that it is based on that transaction date and when that merchant feeds it. And it's always a little bit tricky at the end of the year, because you might make a charge at June 29th, but if the merchant doesn't clear their system and feed it through until July, it won't show up with the transaction date necessarily until July. So it's kind of it's just one of those times of year where it's really great to have this report that comes in saying these are your transactions. And I mean, the report is year round, so you'll keep getting it throughout the year, but to keep in mind what happens throughout the year. But yeah, really, it's based on that transaction date of June 30th or prior.
Hopefully, Joe, you're sticking around for the next hour. If not, FinProHelp at cu.edu. We can address whatever you need.
Very cool.
Back to you, Leila. Thank you.
No, well, and thank you for explaining the POSPO thing, because you're better at that part than I am. I think you spend more time on
I talk a lot on the phone. Hopefully it translates.
That's good. I hope so too. Okay. So now the next bit that we want to talk about are some other critical tasks that departments need to do. So we have subaward estimates that may need to be recorded. So if you have if you have some research speed types and you need to have the subawardee send you an estimate for what happened for work through end of June. Also, if you have resale goods, a physical inventory needs to be completed annually. Now, it doesn't need to be completed necessarily on June 30th. It simply needs to happen once a year. Our bookstore, for example, they resell goods. They do their inventory, I believe, in March. So it's as long as they're doing it every March and it's consistent, then they're hitting that requirement. PETs need to be processed as well, and your cutoff for PETs is second close. There's nothing that's allowed through after that as far as payroll goes for June. And then also all of your financial reports, review them, make corrections, enter accruals as necessary. And in a lot of cases, it's throughout the whole year-end process, but really that week of second close is when your accruals will hit for marketplace and procurement card. And that's when the reviewing of the financial reports really is critical. Now, we've talked about the fiscal year-end calendar a little bit earlier in the slide deck that the OUC has. Each of your campus controllers' offices may have their own calendar for your campus deadlines as well. So I definitely suggest you check those out and call your campus controller's office if you have questions on those. Very good. Now we are going to jump into some of the campus-based tasks. And the campus tasks really ramp up in July. I mean, the campus controller's office is a department too, so we need to do our own reconciliations, and so we're doing all of that throughout the year and especially in June. But in July, then, we are looking at the campus as a whole. We will record certain liabilities, and alphabet soup here. These are campus-based liabilities that we don't really need to go into as far as details of these. Just kind of to be aware, because regardless of where you sit, it's good to know how you fit into the puzzle, essentially, that is fiscal year end, because it's a lot like a puzzle as well. And so these are the other things that are going on around you. So the campus controller's office, we're also going to then calculate and record things like unearned revenue for summer tuition, scholarship allowance, some other revenue deferrals, or the capital asset modules. We do an annual inventory of equipment as well. So we're updating the capital asset module for that. Reclassifying bad debt expense or other presentation entries, and entering final expense accruals or interfund payables. So we have some of these things are, for example, last minute accruals that maybe a department notices an error, a pretty major error, and we decide that it needs to be entered into a journal entry for it, so we'll help with that. There are also some examples, for example, of, like, we do business with CSU. CSU is another state entity. Their financial statements roll up to the state, just like our financial statements roll up to the state. So from the state's perspective, it's just kind of, we're all state entities, and so we need to be able to make sure that our payables match their receivables and vice versa, so that we can make sure that the state has that full picture of what we owe other entities or what they owe us from that perspective. And then also, too, we're reviewing the trial balance and other financial reports to identify items of concern, which sounds scarier than it is. We're really looking at the things that stick out, that look funny, like abnormal balances, variances from the prior year, from the prior month, anything that's non-zero balance, like a clearing, like 553201. If I might plug that one more time, it should be zero. So if it's not, we're going to ask about that. Any odd account codes that might be used, that kind of thing. So that's what we're doing in July. We are also preparing to give the PBCs, the prepared by client documents, to the auditors. We're working on templates and exhibits for the state. And then for Denver, they're recording or blending the year-end results for CU Medicine, because we do blend those in with our financial statements as well. In the system office, they are doing a lot. Oh my goodness. That truly is the year-round task. So our calendar, the one that you find on the OUC website, is based on the state's calendar. So when the state of Colorado publishes their calendar, which is usually round about beginning of March, they take that and they plug it into our calendar so that we have that first draft. And then in April, we have a big calendar meeting and we talk about everything that's on the calendar step by step, line by line, and say, yes, this is the case for this year. It's not the case. Let's change it. This is a better date. That's a better date. And so there's that coordination that's going on between all of those offices that are involved in fiscal year end. And we're getting the calendar then published. In May through October, they're coordinating the external audit and then also coordinating with campuses for those PBCs, those prepared by client documents, as well as the footnotes, the templates, the exhibits, and everything that they need to be able to put the financial reports together. Now, specifically during the month of July, they are also processing the journal entries for expenses, the marketplace and the concur accruals, and allocating other liabilities. So a lot of these liabilities, the alphabet soup, either the OUC creates those liabilities, they're working with actuaries, for example, to say this is what the system liability is or what the campus liability is, and then they're communicating that to the campus so that we can make those journal entries as necessary. But then also things like net pension liability, that gets recorded at the system level completely. It's not something that we record on a campus by campus basis. The OUC also takes that biweekly payroll accrual and accrues it. And then the accrual for the gift fund, the last gift fund transfer of the year. Also, they're booking elimination entries. So when one campus is selling to another campus, for example, as far as the overall picture is concerned, that's just, the one campus to another is two sides of the same coin. We want to eliminate those entries from revenue and expense because it's not a true picture of external activity that's going on. Interfund agency, accounts receivable and payable, and then they're also working on the core year-end journal entries, and core is the state's financial system. When we come to the August to October timeframe, this is really when the financial statements get into gear. The OUC is working with the external auditors so that we have our MD&A, the management discussion and analysis portion of our financial statements, making sure we have the right footnotes based on whatever changes have taken place over this last year, or any GASB statements that now apply that didn't last year. And they're also calculating and reporting pledged revenue. They're putting the component units into the statements as well. Also then working with campuses for state exhibits, and finally publishing the financials, the supplementals, and the e-report, so that we can roll all of those up into the state's financials. Okay. So all of the work that we do, that departments do, that the campuses do, that the OUC does, all of the work that we do with the auditors, it's all to make sure that our annual financial report is as accurate as it can possibly be. And this is the webpage with our annual financial report. You can get it either in the e-report version. There's also a link to download the PDF in case, say, you have a granting agency that wants a hard copy or an emailed copy of it. And then there's also a really great companion site, because as accountants or being in this world, you know, it's easier for us to understand what OPEB is, other post-employment benefits. But if you don't know what OPEB is, or have never heard of it, or it's just this odd word that you hear every once in a while, the companion site is a really great layperson's view of our financial statements and what they actually mean. So if you're new to the financial report, I would say start there, because it's a great, just foundational version of it.
More digestible.
Much more digestible, yes. So the annual report itself is important, not only because it is externally audited, right? That's because, but because it gives us this full financial picture, this point in time of us and our health. And our financial information is used by a lot of different agencies for various reasons. So the Office of the State Controller, I mean, as an entity of the state, the Office of the State Controller ought to be, you know, they ought to pay attention to us a little bit, right? Not just because we're the best, but because we make up a good portion of the state revenues, okay? But also we have the Higher Ed Learning Commission that is looking at our reports. We have the IPEDS, Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System. Every year, based on our annual report and our final numbers, each campus, I should say, enters information into this data system. And this is a way then that we can look at ourselves in comparison to other higher ed institutions. And so we can take a look at this, we can say, we're doing really well in this area, somebody else is doing really well in another area, and perhaps that helps to give us a goal for where we need to be improving, or how we can improve, or gives us even a baseline for where, you know, what are we aiming for, that kind of thing. Bond rating agencies also look at our annual report. Our granting agencies and our donors look at the annual report. They really want to know why or how we're using the money, donors in particular, how well are we using the money that we're given? And then, well, I guess not even in particular, granting agencies too. How well are we using that money? And it all, it's all just right there in that final annual report. So a few resources to help keep us on track. So we had the OUC's year-end calendar and info packet. So we talked about that, showed the web page of that earlier on. And then also each campus has its own resources too. So there are town halls and year-end meetings. So I would suggest if you didn't have a chance to attend the town halls, maybe reach out to your campus controller's office, take a look at the PowerPoint if they put that out on the web. Contact your campus controller's office with questions as well. And also then each campus has a calendar or an email address available as well. And also the Finance Procurement Help Desk. Sam's been a great resource to me here during this webinar, so kudos.
Thank you for the plug. We appreciate it. That brings us into another poll question, actually. Let's go ahead and launch this. Now that you have learned more about fiscal year end, what is the first thing you're going to do with this information? Reconcile, reconcile, reconcile. Ask procurement.card for those reports to help manage your concur expenses. Get those PO and SPO invoices submitted, or review those financial reports. Looks like we've got kind of a mixed bag of replies here. Kind of cutting it close between a few.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Do we take bets on which one is going to win out?
Maybe silent bets. Just keep a note and mental note of it.
And while you're answering the poll question too, if any questions have come up, feel free to answer or ask those, in the chat feature as well.
Yeah. Looks like we've got a good amount of participation here. We'll go ahead and end the poll and we'll share the results here. Looks like reconcile times 3 just barely beat out review my financial reports.
I think that's excellent.
I always wonder, if you're like the admin person in the department, how hard it might be to wrangle all those card holders and get all those reports submitted in a timely fashion.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you for your participation. We'll go ahead and stop the results here. We'll move on to the next slide.
So this is just a quick recap of what we've gone through today. So we talked about June 30th. Why is this date so important? It is our fiscal year end. It is our annual report date. And it really just gives us this bookend to the year so that we can compare our activity to the activity of our peers, look at our own health, and be able to evaluate that in comparison to last year as well. We also talked about the different tasks that need to be performed at year end from a departmental perspective, a campus perspective, and also a system perspective. And then finally, we talked about the resources that are available to keep you on track.
So moving into the question segment, we do have a question from an audience member. Where could I go to learn more about reconciling and reviewing my financial reports? Will there be a class on this possibly?
Yes, there will possibly be a class on this. We'll see what we can do about that. Now, as far as where can you go to learn more? We talked about reconciliations quite a bit. Let's see, I want to say at the end of April, we did a webinar on month-end close. We hit reconciliations pretty hard during that particular webinar, so there's a resource for you as well. You can also reach out to the Finance Procurement Center or reach out to your campus controller's office. I know from Boulder campus perspective, our area accountants are often talking to departments and giving them almost kind of a consulting gig on how to reconcile, how to go about it, because it can be pretty tough. We have I don't know what the average number of speed types a person has to reconcile, but if you think about some of the departments, they're pretty big. I've heard people tell me, I have 200 speed types to reconcile. How do I get to that? And so getting a plan in place for how to get to those each month or each quarter, at least once a year, if nothing else, is pretty key. And so your campus controller's office can help with that too.
And I do recall from previous webinars that the ending of will there be a class on this can sometimes be the kiss of death, but I do believe that that's how this webinar came about.
I think it is.
In the month-end close webinar, there was a question on will there be a fiscal year-end webinar, and here we are. So, yeah, but some great resources back there, and that was a great webinar, the month-end close. So thank you for that question. Anybody else that has any questions, feel free to throw them out. We do have some extra time here.
So coming up next as well, we have the accruals session, which will start at 2.
Elena or Elina Day, I hope I didn't mess up your name.
Yeah, hi Elena.
Hi Elena, thank you for the pronunciation there. Can you give us a list of useful, commonly used MFIN reports for fiscal year end? This is familiar, actually.
Why don't you go for it then?
Let's see. We have Not the most frequently used one, but the abnormal balance is what we were talking when we were off mic, because you can find some interesting stuff
Mhm.
in there. Outstanding encumbrances, speed type one-liner, and speed type summary, if I'm doing them from memory. What do you run
Speed
with?
type summary and speed type one-liner are pretty similar.
Oh, true.
I would definitely add the financial detail
Yep.
in there as well.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, those are good ones. Yeah.
That's the bank statement for me.
Yep,
As a layperson,
exactly.
I just go through and see what happened, when did it happen, how was it labeled.
And on the OUC's website, I believe it's under training, MFIN training is an option under that menu item. And there are several, there are descriptions of the MFIN reports and what each is for. And so that can also help if you have a particular item you're trying to find for fiscal year end, which MFIN report to use for that.
Specifically, Alina, that is cu.edu/controller. And then there's a training tab, and then MFIN reports training. Another question here from Ligia. I'm sorry.
Ligia.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. This may be an accruals question, but I have interview travel I'm booking this week for travel next week. What should I do to make sure they go to the correct fiscal year?
All right, so I'm looking at my calendar. Today's the 17th for travel next week. So because the travel itself is occurring in this fiscal year and the expense report is unlikely to be able to be fully approved or have that campus approval at least by the 20th, which is the deadline for that, you may want to accrue that travel expense. So essentially you would do the travel report. It can, go through that and then mainly hit the big points of it for that accrual. And we'll talk about manual accruals and how to go about those in the next session. But to reach out to your area accountant or your campus controller's office with specifics on that one too.
So I guess that brings us to the end of this presentation. Thank you everybody for participating in the poll questions and for providing questions. We'll be back at 2 p.m. for our next presentation, It's a Cruel World. And thank you again, everybody. Look forward to seeing you soon.